Greetings, YouTube. Please excuse my absence. I've had a very busy month with events and debates and stuff like that, and I thought that at this point in time I would be looking at making a video on toxic masculinity because that's been a focus in the debates that I've been at. But last night, quite late, I was invited onto RT television from New York, but it was broadcast in Russian language. So we'll be getting the video for that, but I'm not sure what we're going to see. So there was a presenter talking in Russian and then a translator translating to me, and then I was talking and the translator was translating my words. It was actually incredibly challenging just because of that. But I'm not sure whether when they send us a video through, it's all just going to be in Russian or they're going to have the translation or what. But I guess I'll probably upload it either way. But yeah, because of that, that's what I'd like to talk about today. The subject at hand in that interview, which was discrimination against white men in particular in work. And so just before I came on, I kept asking the researcher who'd contacted me because they were talking about a particular story, which is a guy, I think, in the US who's claiming that he's been discriminated against because he's a white man. And I kept asking him, what's this guy's name? What's this guy's name? And he kept saying to me, oh, he hasn't replied. And I'm like, I just want to know his name so I can look it up. But I never got the name. And so I just went and searched on a search engine, white man discriminated against in hiring. And what I pulled up, I mean, to be fair, I did search Google, I used Google. And so it's probably not surprising that what came up was just article after article about how white men are not discriminated against at all. You can tell because they've got all the good jobs, which is absolute bollocks, let's be honest. So, what I've been thinking about anyway is, how we base a lot of the assumption, the kind of feminist dominant cultural narrative that women and ethnic minorities, but particularly women, are discriminated against in work on the pay gap, which, as we all know, is a work gap. So, between 22 and 39, there is virtually zero pay gap. And, some years it transpires that actually it's a negative pay gap, i.e. a pay gap in favour of women. And then, at 40, when women start more and more dropping out of the workforce to engage in caring kind of roles, then the pay gap starts to widen. And, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, for me, I think what proves the fact that this is not because we're raising women to only view themselves as carers and, to be biased against women and stuff like this is the gender equality paradox. So in countries where there are more gender equal policies, you see the occupational segregation, sex segregation, far more than in countries where there's actual, legal discrimination against women. There women go into more masculine orientated or more masculine areas of work because they need to make money. But when, women are offered all of the opportunities and the maternity leave and they've got equal rights, they do what they want, and what they want to do is often work in caring roles or, be at home caring for children or elderly relatives. That's something that women feel or find meaning in, and that's fine. And we've also got the fact that women are spending more than men. And we've got the fact that women are responsible in the UK. We pay 27% of the tax, and yet we use the lion's share of services. So, you know, the idea that the work gap shows that there's some kind of discrimination against women and women are having a hard time is just ludicrous, in my opinion. And, you know, obviously, while we're putting so much effort, like I'm going to explore in a moment, into getting women into male-dominated industries, or attractive male-dominated industries, I should say, professions where women dominate, like teaching and social work, where actually more men might be good for service users. You know, I mean, I was at a debate about is toxic masculinity dangerous in the academy, and I was reading The Empathy Gap by William Collins in preparation for that, and you know, he mentions studies wherein women teachers in particular mark down boys, and boys intuit this and they work less hard. And also, there was another study that found that when children of both sexes know that a male teacher is going to be marking their work, they actually invest more and work harder and do better. So, you know, there is a definite argument for it being possibly a good idea to get more male teachers, and yet there's very little talk of this, certainly from feminists. And obviously, you know, there's no push to get women into the dangerous and dirty dad jobs where 97% of workplace fatalities are men. But yeah, I mean, as far as the idea that there is no discrimination against men in the workplace goes, you know, I've been looking at the education system, as I've spoken about, and you know, just at my university, in the Open University, they've committed to raising the proportion of women in senior positions from 27.6% to 40% by 2020. And how do you think they're going to do that? You know, I was at Messages for Men on Sunday, and I was talking to a former postman, and he was telling me, you know, he was like the manager of the post office or something, and his superiors came to him and said, can you please promote women and ethnic minorities? And he said no. You know, which is all more power to him. I don't know if that's got anything to do with the reason he's a former postman. You know, he said he will promote people on merit, and if they happen to be women or from an ethnic minority, then all right, that's fine, whatever. But, you know, he's not only not gonna give jobs to people or promotions to people who deserve them because they're white men, but also, you know, he pointed out that it's incredibly offensive. He said, you know, to women and people from ethnic minorities. He pointed out that the best boss he'd ever had was a woman, and she'd got there to her position, you know, absolutely off her own back from her own hard work, and everybody respected her for it, and the office ran like clockwork. So that's what's going on in the OU. You know, there's Alessandro Strumia's presentation, where he found that since 1995, women have been being hired and promoted with less than half of the citations that men have when they're hired and promoted in the physics field. Then there's the BBC, who declared targets of getting 50% women into their workforce, both on and off screen, 15% black and minority ethnic, 8% disabled, and 8% LGBT. Now, as William Collins points out in his book, unless they're going to find an awful lot of disabled black lesbians, that's going to leave only 19% of the jobs accessible to white men, which isn't very representative, is it? And yeah, I mean, the thing is, all this stuff's going on. You know, you've got Athena SWAN as well, which is an initiative run by a charity to get more women into leadership positions in the academy. And they award gold, silver and bronze awards to different departments based on seeing an increase in the number of women in their leadership roles. And actually, you know, there has been state funding that's been conditional on these awards having been earned. And, you know, that was at the Biomedical Research Unit and the Biomedical Research Centre or something. I think it was in 2011. But you've also got feminists calling for that to be the blanket rule across the academy. You know, and as Alessandro Strumia points out regarding physics, you know, where, as I've just explained, women aren't discriminated against, women are seriously privileged, they're seriously advantaged in that field. And yet there aren't so many women, and, you know, their papers aren't cited so often. And he suggests that the reason for this may be because men are more likely, you know, although it's rare even in men, there are more men than women who have the skills and the desire to excel in that field. And, you know, that's almost certainly due to the IQ distribution that sees more men at the very top end than there are women. But all this is going on and it's totally illegitimate. You know, according to Fawcett in 2016, 93% of the British public are non-feminist. And, you know, according to BuzzFeed and YouGov, more than a third of young people hold actively anti-feminist views, like the idea that feminism is demonizing men and discriminating against men, you know, which is absolutely true. And so it's just incredibly galling. I don't think this is where our citizenry want to go in terms of policy and legislation. I think that we want to treat people equally and on merit. And then, you know, I've also been thinking about this feminist idea that men have been privileged historically in the workforce. And when you look at the evidence, you know, just think about it for a moment. It's utterly farcical. You know, a tiny minority of men may well have been privileged, but the majority of men in history have been working class or less. And how many of them do you think became barristers in the 1800s? None, you know? They were working on large-scale infrastructure projects and down mines with absolutely eye-watering fatality rates. And besides, you know, even if men were historically advantaged in employment, it still doesn't mean that it's right to discriminate against men now. You know, you don't fix a historic discrimination against one group by discriminating against another in, you know, the present day. That's not justice. That is revenge. And I also just want to share with you before I go, I've been reading this excellent book called Culture War, Art, Identity, Politics and Cultural Entryism by Alexander Adams, who's an artist and a dissident critic. And he did a really good podcast with James Delingpole recently at the Battle of Ideas, which I'll share in the description. But I mean, this book's really interesting, and he talks about all the kind of different cultural Marxist strands and how they're just degrading the world of fine art. But he's got a chapter or an essay, because it's a series of essays, called On Quota Programming. And there's a really interesting section that I think pertains very well to what I've been talking about. Alexander says, "Identarianism is not a fuzzy, warm principle of being nice to people and treating others equally. Quite the contrary. It demands people be treated unequally. It divides people into subsets, classifies individuals' worth minutely with matrices of privilege and social status, undercuts individuals' autonomy, and discourages, even curtails, individuals forming personal taste. It demands advancement of minority interests by authoritarian means. It accommodates factional interests and dehumanizes opponents. It encourages tribalism. It sets up systems of patronage bestowed by the enlightened upon recipients who are expected to reciprocate by recognizing the bestower of status as a good ally. It seeks to suppress free speech and free thought. Identarianism is dictatorial and dehumanizing to its core. As an ideology, it is riven by contradiction, hypocrisy, and doublethink. Identarianism is part nihilistic revolutionary movement, part narcissistic cult of selfhood, part religion of moral fury. It nurtures a culture of self-hatred, guilt, and contempt for Western civilization, even, especially, among middle-class white people. This self-hating rationalizes a middle-class white person having certain presumed advantages, while at the same time getting the moral comfort of siding with the oppressed class. The presumed advantages are never given up, but are paid for in emotional reparations of guilt and anger." So I do recommend you go and find that book on Amazon. It's a really good read. And yeah, I'm interested to know what your thoughts are on this. Or have you seen discrimination against white men in your workplace? Have you been a victim of it? Or do you even think I'm talking bollocks? Let me know. Thanks, bye.